Guys, welcome back to another episode of Entrance and Beyond. And today I have a very special guest. So I have a guest who is currently a PhD student at Johns Hopkins University in the United States. And for the folks that don't have a lot of idea about Johns Hopkins, it's QS World University ranking as of 2024 is 24 globally, specifically for PhDs and things like that. And it's one of the premium institutes in the US and I would say across the world. So my guests, they basically, just to give an introduction about them, did a BSMS degree from IISER Mohali, and then they did a MS thesis from IST Austria, and currently they're pursuing their PhD at the Johns Hopkins University. Hello Smriti Chhibber, hope you are doing fine. It would be nice if you could introduce yourself to the audience. Hopefully, I didn't miss out
Um,
important details.
yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Smriti. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the kind introduction. Yeah. I'm doing a PhD here in biophysics, and I've always been interested in research. And it's nice to be in a podcast where people are looking for other options as well, not just like the traditional JE or medical path. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay. We're also honored to have you with us today. So, Smriti, could you share your journey after grade 12? Like, how did you run into like this PhD and all that stuff? Like, why did you want to go to ISIS Mohali? And if you could talk a bit about that experience you had.
Okay, yeah. So when I was supposed to be in my 11th and 12th, I was confused if I should take medical or non-medical because I really liked biology, but I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. So like that doesn't leave me with too many options if I do medical. So I remember like I had a huge thing with my parents and I was like, oh no, I don't know what to do and everything. And then my teachers told me I should take non-medical and do additional biology. So in my 11th and 12th, I had non-medical with additional biology, which is pretty much opposite of what usually people do. Um, but so my idea was that I want to do something that's not engineering and not medical, but I do want to stay in science. So one of my friend's brothers, he was in ISER, and I met him, and he told me how his experience has been. And I was like, oh, that sounds like something I would want to do. So that's how I got introduced to the whole idea of ISERs and what it is. So in my 11th and 12th, I was like, oh, I do want to get into research because that seems like something I would like doing. I didn't have a plan of doing like, oh, I want to do a PhD or I want to go into research. It was just like, I don't want to do non-medical or medical. I don't want to take any of the traditional paths. But I do want to stay in science. So that sounded like one thing I would really like doing. More of it also was that talking to him, I kind of realized how different ISER curriculum is from usual BSc, MSc things. That really sounded very interesting to me. So that's how I got to know about ISERs, and that's how I got into the whole idea of research. Again, wasn't really planned, just kind of worked out for me. But yeah.
Okay. So, could you explain the entire process you went through in order to get into ISIS? Because a lot of people, whoever's in that PCM route, they're running behind IITs, NITs, and they don't really have a lot of idea how they can get into these institutes such as ISERs that are really ranked high, curriculum wise, I would say, but they're just not
Yeah.
about it. So could you just go through that entire process of like how you can get selected to
Yeah.
ISERs?
Sure. So when I was giving my exams, the options were either through the ISER aptitude test or through KVPY or through a JEE or AIM or medical rank. So if you are in the top 10,000 rank in JEE Advanced, then you have eligibility for ISER seats. Or there used to be KVPY. So based on your rank in KVPY, you could apply to ISERS, and depending on what rank you got in KVPY, you could get into different ISERs. And then the third was the ISER aptitude test, which I went through, and that is an exam that happens usually after JEE mains. Most of the exams are already over by then. So it happens after that. And that exam has physics, chemistry, math, and biology, all four subjects. And then based on what score you get a rank in that, and you can fill the preference so what institute you want to go, and you can apply through that, and that's like one way of going into ISERS. So the patterns have changed in the last few years on how the exam is and everything. ISERS have gotten a little more popular since I joined. When I joined, basically no one knew about ISERS. Now it's getting a little more popular. People are getting to know about it, so more applications are coming in. But that's like, and KVPY is not a thing anymore, so it's only through two routes now. But this is how you can apply for ISERS if you're in your 12th class and you're thinking about getting into research.
Okay. So Smriti, you had mentioned that the curriculum at IISERs was somewhat different as compared to our general like IITs, NITs, or DSCs and MNCs. So would you want to elaborate about that? Like, how exactly is it different, and like, what exactly do you study once you've entered IISERs?
Okay. Yeah, so the first difference is that it's a BSMS course. So you get your bachelor's and master's together. It's a 5 year course. Um, Another difference is that it's based on the American system and not European system, which usually BSc, MSc is based on. So how the curriculum is designed is that you don't really do a bachelor's in a subject. You do a bachelor's with a major in something, a minor in something. That's how ISER system goes. So for the first 2 years, when you go into ISER, you have to study all the subjects: physics, chemistry, math, biology, no matter what background you come from. And then in the third year, you pick your major depending on whatever your liking is. So then your subjects get narrowed down, and the courses you take get narrowed down accordingly. So I have a major in physics and a minor in data science, from ISER Mohali, and that's how the curriculum is. What I really liked about the curriculum is that if you want to go into research, ISER curriculum is designed for someone who wants to go into research, because the way the courses are designed, we had lab experience, we had regular coursework, and every year we get 3 months off for summer, where we 2 or 3 months off, I think, for summer, where we can do internship projects, work in research labs. That kind of experience is usually something you have to do on your own if you do a regular bachelor's from some other university. ISER curriculum is designed to give you that research experience as a part of your curriculum. So a lot of times you will be given credits for if you work with the professor in their lab for research and stuff like that. So it the curriculum is designed to prepare you for a career in research. And that's what I think I genuinely really liked about it. Apart from that, the other thing is that not just it wasn't just that, it was also the fact that um, if you're coming in an environment like ISER, when I joined, people around me were all the kind of people who didn't want to go to IITs or who didn't want to do, traditional JE route. So none of us really wanted to go through the placement cycle kind of things. So the ISER curriculum is kind of exploratory in that sense, that if you don't know what you want to do, you have the freedom to choose and decide, because you won't really be pushed or peer pressured into just placements um, directly, because that's not how usually things go in ISER. I have friends from my class who went to art direction, who went into photography for masters. So it's not just like you do science, but you get introduced to so many different things that you can get into, which I found like was the best thing about my time there. And another thing is, like, in the first 2 years, it's not just physics, chemistry, math, biology. We also do social science courses, philosophy courses, and all those courses are linked to either science somehow, or I have taken courses in cinema, in theater, in drama, in ISER, which is not a very traditional kind of courses offered in a science institute otherwise. So I definitely think that's what made a huge difference in the way I look at things now, and the kind of options I saw in front of me when I was looking for job opportunities and stuff. So that's why I really think the ISER system is kind of different from a regular IIT or NIT route. Because you're openly, you can explore whatever you want. You're not forced into a stream as soon as you join.
I think that also would probably reduce the rat race culture if you're like familiar with that, because in many institutes, at the end of the day, like when placements come around, it's some sort of rat race,
Oh,
and
for
I think
sure.
that would
That's
be.
definitely true. I didn't feel that in ISER, but it's also because I think when you're doing a bachelor's in science and not engineering or something traditional that's very highly uh, you have high rates of placement for that. The rat race is more intense there. If you have a degree, if you have a bachelor's or master's in science or like physics or biology, in India you don't have a lot of jobs for which you will be like an expert in. So the placements anyway that you get are not super catered to you. So people generally explore other routes. Some go into data science, some go into civil services, stuff like that. So definitely the rat race is less, but it's also because nothing is very well defined in the 5 years that you work there. You are not really doing a very well defined career trajectory. It's more like you're open to explore what you like, what you don't like. So there are pros and cons to that system, definitely for sure.
Okay. So, when you entered ISIS, did you ever have in mind you want to do a PhD, or was there like some particular time in ISIS where you worked on some research projects, and then after that you thought about like maybe I could go abroad or do a PhD or something like that?
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know I wanted to do a PhD. I didn't even know what a PhD, like doing a PhD meant. I was just like, oh, it sounds like a degree that you do after your master's or something. I didn't know what it meant on paper. Research is also not something you don't meet like someone who's doing a PhD in science every second day. So I wasn't really aware, and I don't come from a family where anyone has done a PhD or anything. So this was very new for me. But when I went into ISERS, I did some research projects, and I really liked the kind of work I was doing. And I got chances to go to other countries for internships as well. I think which really helped me realize what else is out there, like what doing a PhD really means and what being a researcher actually means. I think I really liked that part of it, and I was like, so the natural next thing I wanted to do is a PhD. So that's how I ended up, doing a PhD.
Okay. And you mentioned the fact that you got to do like internships abroad. And I think the culture out there is definitely better because I was just reading a statistic where they said that around in India, approximately 400 to 500 people per billion go for actually, per million, I think, actually go for
Mm.
PhD and things like that, as compared to the United States where it's around 4,000, it was 3,000 something per
See,
year.
yeah,
So I think that would really help you sort of understand the value of a PhD because in
yeah,
India,
definitely.
culturally, I don't think we're really into that.
Yeah.
And I just had a question out of the box. Like, when you're doing a research, is it important to think out of the textbook? Like, typically, what people do, like even till 12th, is that there's not a lot
Uh,
of people that actually think outside the textbook. They just focus on what's
yeah.
in the
I
textbook.
think I think research is essentially that. If I think how I figured out I want to do research is the fact that when I went to school, I had a lot of questions that were not there in books. When I was, attending classes and stuff, and I was like, that would be really cool to know why this happened, and that sounds like a really fun question to work on and stuff like that. And when I got to know more about what research actually means, you're working on things that no one has worked on before. These are questions that you will not find in books. So I think that aspect of it is what really interested me, because you every day I come to work, I get to work on something that nobody has done before, and most of research is driven by curiosity, not really to get paid or get some other company's value increased or stuff like that. Most of it is purely based out of I really want to know the answer to this question, and I feel like that's what the whole idea is. So I definitely think it's a field for people who are creative but also like science. So, because you have to think a little bit out of the box every day, with the kind of questions you want to work on, what all ways you can work on those questions. So, yeah, it's like that.
That probably must be overwhelming at times when you're working on something totally
Oh, for sure,
different.
that's true. I mean, the more interesting it is, it's also very overwhelming knowing that what you're doing nobody else has done before, so nobody else knows how to do it as well.
Yeah,
So having the confidence to be like, oh, why am I the person who can solve this if no one ever could? So yeah.
yeah. So I would want to jump into PhD. Like you even mentioned, you didn't have a lot of idea what PhD actually was, even after entering ISIS. And I think that's
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
majority of people. I don't think there are a lot of people that actually would exactly know
Yeah.
what PhD is. So, like, yeah, what is a PhD and how is it exactly different from like our typical degrees that we have, like bachelor's, master's?
Okay. Yeah. So a PhD, it's also PhD is different depending on what field you're doing a PhD in. So PhD in social sciences is slightly different from a PhD in sciences. So a PhD, so when I say PhD in, in the wherever I mention PhD, I'm talking about PhD in sciences. Um, PhD is typically designed in a way, it's generally a 4 to 5 year degree that you do after your master's or your bachelor's, where depending on what country you do and the style of it is a little different. But the idea is that you have a research problem, like a big research question that you're targeting, or a few small research questions that you're targeting, and you work on that for the rest of your 4 or 5 years. At the end, you write a dissertation, you submit that, you defend your thesis, and you get a PhD degree, and you become a fake doctor essentially. But yeah, um, otherwise, what day to day of a PhD looks like in US, it's designed in a way that for the first 2 years you have to do courses and you have to do some teaching, and you also do research. What doing research really means is what something usually people don't really know who are not doing PhD. Like, what does doing research even mean? Like, what do you mean when you say you're doing research? So I work in biophysics and my work is computational. So we generally target problems. So I work on virus assemblies. So I'm trying to understand how viruses assemble and how particularly their hexagonal structures come together to form their final viroid. That's basically like, more or less the target of my PhD project. um, so when I say I'm doing research, I'm trying to figure out ways to understand this process a little better and maybe contribute my own findings to what can we do. So we publish research papers every year, and based on what we find out, what we work on, stuff like that. And this is a computational PhD. And then if you're doing experimental work, then you will have a research question in mind, but you're trying to solve that question using by doing experiments and by getting results and seeing how it matches up with what the idea that you have, does it match with your hypothesis or not, and then you publish papers accordingly. That's what like essentially doing research means. And doing PhD means doing research every day for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. And you talked about the teaching thing. So, like, do you teach at? Did you like teach at John Hopkins? And like, what exactly do you like like teach? Like, do you teach something that's related to your research work, or is it like more sort of?
Yeah, so I what I'm teaching right now is related to my coursework. I take an undergrad class called Introduction to Computing. So what the I teach the undergrads at Hopkins who are either from biology background or just CS. So whatever the first course in coding they do, I'm teaching that course. So that's what I do every day. Again, teaching is not something that's there for all PhDs. My program requires me to teach for 2 years. A lot of programs don't have that requirement. Teaching, I think, is a good thing in a PhD because a lot of career options you have after a PhD is being a professor, and being a professor will require you to teach, so it's always nice to have experience beforehand. Yeah, that's what I teach here.
Yeah. So teaching probably would be interesting because, as you know, in the US, there are like people from a lot of backgrounds. So I think that would really help out
Oh,
in.
definitely. It's also a little bit of a cultural difference because
Yeah.
when you do your undergrad everything in India and then you're here and you're teaching Americans now, so you're like, oh, I don't know how it works here, what backgrounds everyone's coming in. The more you talk to them, you realize a lot of things that we do in school they don't do in school. They do those things in undergrad. So those are the things that you come here and realize, oh yeah, things are a little different here.
Yeah. And it's probably more chilled out over there. I think the professor-teacher relationship. I don't know.
I mean, it's chilled out, but I do think it's more work here to teach because in India, if you have to teach, the professor has the autonomy to decide what they teach, how they take their courses. Here, I don't know why it's the thing. I also worked in Europe before. It's not a thing in Europe, but Americans take their courses very seriously. They are super into how they design their curriculum and stuff. They have a bunch of assignments. The course ITA, they have to do like 70 assignments in the whole semester. So they get a lot of work and they have to do a lot of courses and stuff. So it's a lot of work for them. So that way, I do think it's designed a little differently. But yeah, yeah, the student teacher relationship is a lot more chill here compared to India.
Yeah. So, would you want to run us through the application process? If you could just summarize, like in general, what the entire process is to actually like applying to universities for getting a PhD, and what factors should one have in mind before actually like applying for
Yeah,
one?
I see. Okay. So when I was applying for my PhD, I applied in Europe and I applied in US. So the whole process goes like this. You need to have a little bit of research experience before, either in the field that you're applying or adjacent fields, or have some idea what you want to do for the next 5 years. Um, so that's one thing. So you need three letters of recommendation from either someone you worked with in research capacity, or someone you've taken a course with, or anyone basically who knows you well enough to give you a recommendation letter. So you need three of those. You need to write a statement of purpose, which will basically tell that this is who I am, this is what I've done before, and this is what I would like to do if I join a PhD here. And you put your CV. And along with that, it's also your grade transcripts and stuff like that. So, three letters of recommendation, one statement of purpose, one CV, and your transcripts. That's basically what you need to apply. What they look at when they're looking at PhD applications is that how well of a fit you are for a particular lab that you're applying to. So like I in my undergrad had a lot of I did a lot of summer internships and my master's thesis and stuff like that. So I had a good enough research experience before I applied to PhD, and my research experience also aligned with what they were looking for here. So that's how I got into this program. After you've submitted your applications and everything, you also have to give TOEFL exam or any English proficiency exam if you're applying to US. This is not required by other countries, but US needs an English proficiency test. Yeah, so after your applications are done, you will get shortlisted for an interview, and in that interview, you have to talk to other professors, and then those professors will basically ask you about the work you've done in the past, how much you know about that work, and stuff like that. And then after that, you get admitted. I think one important thing that people don't know about PhDs is that most countries have fully funded PhDs. So I'm not spending money to do this degree. Most countries will have a paid fully funded PhD program where you will get a monthly salary. So it's more like a job. It's less like a degree. Um, so when I came here, before I even knew about a PhD, the only idea we have in our head is that if you want to do a degree, you have to pay to do a degree. But PhD is one degree that you generally get paid for because it's like a job. So I do get a monthly salary here, and I when I came here, they also reimbursed me for my flights from India and things like that. So all those things are covered, and I also got a reallocation grant when I came here just to help me with the move and everything. So I haven't had to spend any money since I think since my undergrad. Um, so that's been super helpful. So I do think PhD is a good option for people who want to do a degree but don't want to pay a lot of money, especially in US, because if you want to do a master's here or an undergrad degree here, it costs a lot of money. But PhDs are fully paid. Obviously, I mean, you have to think about other factors as well, but that's one good thing about a PhD is that you don't have to worry about money.
Yeah. So now that you talked a bit about like the US and things like that, I wanted to talk about like what are the downsides of doing a PhD specifically in the US, because from India people usually believe that if you're going to a foreign country, like things are set for you. There's no sort of burden or pressure sort of thing. So like what are the downsides, if you could like sort of yeah, talk about them if there's anything you face.
Yeah. I think the downside for me personally was that I don't know, just moving to US is a hard thing. Just moving countries is a difficult thing. We always glorify this in India that, oh, you got to go to Canada, you got to go to US or these countries. Moving to a different country on your own is kind of difficult. I didn't realize that before I came here, and it's very isolating as well because all of your family, everyone you know is in India, and yeah, now you have to like create a new life from scratch. I don't think this experience is like specific to a PhD, but it's specific to anyone who moves to a different country. So that's what I felt was a downside. and US is so far away from India that if I have a family problem or if something happens to my family, I have to, it takes me a day, like 24 hour of more than 24 hour of travel to just get home. So sometimes you just think you're like missing out on things at home just because now you're here. Other thing is that doing a PhD is not very easy. It's a difficult degree to do because you have to juggle a bunch of things together. It's not like, oh, I'm going to a new country and I'm also getting paid. It's so much fun. It's not. Sometimes it's extremely hard and extremely overwhelming. It's a difficult degree to do because you're giving 4 or 5 years of your life to a research problem or a project or something. There's so many moving parts. You have to do courses, you have to teach, you also have to do your own work and stuff. So managing all of that is very apart from the fact that now you're an adult, so you have to live by yourself, do your laundry, do your dishes, stuff like that. You have no house help, nothing here. So everything, cook for yourself, those things. So I think that's what I find the hardest, just living away from family and learning to be on my own as an adult was a difficult transition for me. And then just getting overwhelmed by just regular PhD work and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. And the good thing you mentioned was the house help thing, because people don't have any idea about that. That you have to do
Oh,
everything.
definitely.
You have to drive to get groceries, and like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, at least like you can just.
Definitely. And I think a lot of things in US are very glorified for people who live in India. They
Yeah.
think the life here is so set, it's amazing, you get everything, you live in a foreign country. Um, you are by yourself for most parts of your adulthood. You have to do everything by yourself. And then also, if you're in India, your family is always involved in what you're doing every day. So if you, most people don't think about getting a car or on their own till they're in their late 20s at least. But here, if you have to go anywhere, you need a car in US. So just getting by around without a car is difficult. And then thinking that, oh, how can I finance myself to buy a car at some point? So just thinking about those regular things every day. And just being like, oh, I have to study and I have to teach and I have to do courses and I also have to cook for myself 3 times a day. Just yeah.
And especially the weather. Like if you go newly to the northeast, like the moment you
Oh,
just
definitely.
come out of the airport, you just like the weather's kind of gloomy. Go like I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, definitely. It just started snowing here today, so
Yeah,
it's just been very cold since morning.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So that's another aspect. Just like because the first time you go, it's like it's alone. Like if you go with your family, it's fine, but like it's still sort
yeah.
of me. Like coming from a country that like India, that's very vibrant. I don't think it's really.
Yeah, definitely. It's super isolating and just making friends and stuff from, now you're here, you have to make friends, you have to socialize. And if you are doing a PhD or a degree like this, you don't have a lot of time to socialize every day. So you have to find time to make friends, otherwise you'll just be isolated for the whole time.
Yeah. So, are there any visa issues associated? Because there are a lot of visa issues I've heard with people that go for masters undergrad with the H-1B that
I
invites.
see.
Yeah.
For PhD, usually it's not an issue just because PhD is fully funded. Usually, master students who have visa issues are the people because they have to show that they have the funds to do a master's.
Mm.
So, all the friends I know who came here for masters during their visa process, they had to bring all their bank documents, bring everything, all property they had to show that I have enough money to fund myself for this program. But when you get your offer letter for a PhD, it's written that you're getting paid this much amount every year. So you are not paying anything on your own. You will get paid. And if you're doing a PhD in a good university, the name of the university is generally like people know the name, so they are not very suspicious of where you're going. Sometimes if people are here for and they apply to universities that are not very well known, then it can be a visa issue because then it's like, oh, why are you going to this random university in middle of nowhere? But usually it's not. For PhD, it's not an issue. You get an offer letter, the university gives you all the necessary documents for your visa process. So you just have to apply for visa, and then everything else, like all the documents essentially that you need, are there. And we also apply through the F1 visa, which is also the visa master students apply for. So yeah, the process, the only difficult part about the process was finding a visa slot, like just the appointment to get the get to the place for interview and stuff. But rest of it was, yeah, pretty easy.
Yeah. And is the green card process fast track, like the citizenship thing, if you do a PhD?
Yeah, I think for a lot of cases it is. The people I know who have green cards here, they came here like not very long ago. 6 7 years of being here, they got a green card, which is not very common experience in US. Usually you have to be here for like at least 15 20 years before you can apply for citizenship and stuff. The thing is that after you've done your PhD, you're a very highly qualified individual in their country. So for them, like letting you go out of this country to work in a different place is a loss, like intellectual loss to them. So a lot of times it's fast tracked because of that. And if you a lot of people who do a PhD from Hopkins or from my department, they go into government jobs here or defense companies, stuff like that. And once you're applying to these companies, they apply for your green card while you're here as already. Because to be part of any government organization, you need to be a citizen. And if you have if you have enough value addition to their company, they do apply for your citizenship themselves. So you don't have to worry about those things. You also come here on a STEM OPT, so after you're done with your PhD, you can stay here for 3 years, which is not the case for. I'm not really sure about the whole thing, but STEM OPT gives you 3 years after your PhD, so you have 3 years to find jobs and other things after coming here.
I think for masters, it's definitely not 3 years. I think it's way
Yeah,
less.
it's less than that for masters, I think. And then depending on what kind, like MBA is not considered, I think, like masters here or something. So for MBA, it's even less than a regular masters. So I'm not really sure about the technicalities there, but yeah.
Yeah. So now that you've talked about jobs, like could you quickly just summarize or tell like some of the options apart from being a professor, like you mentioned that a lot of people become a professor. What are the couple more options, and what are you looking to like? Do you have something in mind for yourself after completing your?
Yeah, okay. So there are basically, because once you have a PhD, you're basically qualified for anything in your own field, because that's the highest degree you can get in your field. So every job that's available to a master's or a bachelor student, you have options for those jobs. Firstly, other thing is that you can apply for professor position in India or here. It's like a government job in India, so people, they're just like, oh, it's nice, it's chill. You take a few classes a day, and yeah. So that's one way. That's one kind of job you can get after a PhD. Other is just like depending on what field you're in. Like because I do a lot of computation, I can go for data science jobs here. Um, and because I will have a PhD, I am eligible to apply for senior roles directly instead of doing, because my five years of PhD can be considered as work experience in those companies. So I can apply for slightly higher positions. So it won't be like if I joined directly after bachelor's, I would have to wait the same amount of time to get to that point. Um, Other types of jobs are like either in Navy or defense or army here in US, because they're looking for researchers who do different kinds of things. So basically defense based research. You can also apply for same kinds of jobs in India, like in DRDO, ISRO. They have jobs for PhDs and scientists, depending on what field you're in, what kind of work you do. And they pay a lot of money, and they also give you citizenship, so that's nice. And the other kind of job is consultancy, which I didn't know about before coming here. Consultancy is a thing where companies hire you to be their expert in some subject. So law firms will hire scientists if they're working with pharma companies, or if, because I do biophysics, I have a lot of work with pharma, like just in general biology that's relevant to pharmaceuticals. So a lot of people from my department go on to join pharma companies after this. and you can be a consultant for a law firm or a different kind of firm who work with pharma companies. So you can be their expert scientist on the team who can explain them what the details of the case are. So that's one kind of job I didn't know about before coming here, that okay, this is also something you can do. And then there are other regular jobs based on what your expertise is in. Because I'm from computation, I can apply for any kind of coding job like Google, Amazon, those kind of things.
Okay. So thank you, Smriti, for sparing some time with us. I think it was a really good podcast, and people really got a great idea about the details about a podcast, details about a PhD. Sorry.
Yeah.
And is there anything you'd want to give, like any more advice you'd want to give to the audience? Like, there,
Advice, I would just like to say that if you are someone who likes science, considering to do a PhD is a good idea. Um, I never thought where all places a PhD would take me. I was able to go to Europe because of my master's thesis fully funded, and I was able to come here fully funded because of a PhD. I don't think if I regularly, my parents would have been able to afford to
yeah,
send me to all these places by myself. So I do think it's not just the career aspect; it's also the life aspect that jobs like these bring, or opportunities like these bring. You get to explore things you otherwise won't have been able to explore. So, yeah, my advice would be just to look outside the box of placements and jobs and see that there are other options out there. And if this is something that you like, it's a good option to also do. Yeah.
okay. So thank you so much, Smriti. It was great talking